Last session, remember, I drew a circle and I talked about the 360-degree leader. We spent the entire session talking about the toughest person you will ever lead is you. We talked about self-leadership. I want to explore a little further sort of the other spokes of that wheel. Talked about leading down, leading laterally, and leading up. So let's handle the easiest one first, the one about which there's the most leadership material. If you go online and look at leadership books, 90% of the books that are written about leadership are about leading down. And that's a very challenging direction in which to lead. Let's spend a few moments on it, and then we'll get to the more complex ways of leading in just a little while. When I think of leading down, I never think of, hierarchically, where I'm the guy and then there are these people beneath me. I'm a little uncomfortable with the way the circle runs to sort of suggest that model. Remember, Jesus said one time to a group of people that some leaders lord it over the people that they lead. And then remember what he said? He said, don't you ever do that. Don't be mentioned among those kinds of leaders. Arrogant leaders, powered up leaders, superior leaders, they pay a price, and discerning followers won't take that for long. Undiscerning followers might stay in the game for a while. You'll lose your most discerning people if there's the sense of superiority. We need to do everything in our power to create that it's us, it's not me and you, the underlings, it's us, trying to move from here to there, and we all have a role to play. Okay, so having made that little caveat statement, when I think about who I want on the team with me to move something from here to there, probably a couple decades ago, just for myself, I never thought they would become public, I lined up a bunch of C's, and I talked about character, competence, chemistry, culture, calling. And we're going to talk about calling in the final session, so let's leave that one out of it. But I want to talk about these other C's, because you as leaders will always be drafting people onto your team the rest of your life. In fact, I talked to some of my leadership friends because I'm a boater. I kind of have the image in my mind of a radar wand on top of a boat that's always circling. And that radar wand is looking for targets. It's looking for other boats you could hit, or islands you could hit, or reefs you could hit. So any good boater always uses radar and has it on all the time. The image works for me as a leader. I can't help myself at this stage in my career. Every environment I'm in, my radar's on, and I'm thinking, could I draft you on my team? Could I draft you? Could I draft you? I can't shut it off. I can walk through an airport and go, I think I'm going to find someone, because fantastic people are hard to find. And you better just get in the search mode and stay in the search mode all the time. If you ever say, I have enough fantastic people, and you shut the radar off, 3 of them will feel some need to go someplace else, or catastrophe will strike, or they have to move on for some reason, and all of a sudden you're short of people. So turn the radar wand on, be in search mode all the time for fantastic people. What's a fantastic person? Let's start with character. If you have any doubt as to the substance of character of someone that you're thinking about adding to your team, probe it, get references, interview, take them on a trip with you, look at them in every situation you can put them in, because character matters. When you look at developmental psychologists, there's scary research that indicates that those kinds of issues, the basic truth-telling, taking responsibility, that gets formed before you're 5. The basics of that. Now, there's still some change that can occur, but when you're talking a 22-year-old who's not getting the truth-telling right time after time after time. So I don't want to be uncharitable, so here's what I would say to my colleague. If you would like to do character reclamation and have that person as a discipleship project, if you will, have at it. Invite them over for dinner every night. do character rehab on that person. Let's not pay someone a full-time salary and then have to do character rehab while we're paying them. That's where I draw the line. So everyone's welcome in our church. We want people with truth-telling problems. We want people with addiction problems. We want people with any kind of problem to come to our church because we want to help them with the power of Christ. We probably don't want to add them to our senior team who's trying to take our church from here to there, because we need them to be carrying the mail and not the object of all of our time to rehab their character. Check a person's character as many different ways as you can. I mentioned a few moments ago that I like to take people with me on short trips that I'm thinking about hiring, because you see them in unguarded moments. You see them when you get to the rental car counter and they say that we don't have your car. And you just watch, how do they respond in an unguarded moment? You see it when the overhead luggage compartment falls open and a suitcase falls on. How do they react? Is there loss of temper and immediate rage and all that? Interviews can become environments that are quite safe and predictable. You get out of an interview setting and you can see how people are gonna act when no one's looking, if you will. So anyway, just remember that. Never, ever, ever compromise on character. And if you have someone on your team and a character problem arises, that's probably something that invites them off the team, at least for a time. That's just, in my view, how serious it is. So you go character, and then next is competence. And people like to say, well, Jesus, surrounded himself with incompetent people, uneducated fishermen. So what we ought to do is we ought to surround ourselves with incompetent people, just like Jesus did. I've had a problem with that argument for most of my life. I don't think Peter was an incompetent fisherman. I don't think that some of the other disciples were incompetent. It's true, some of them didn't have literary degrees, but they ran businesses, they had jobs, there were reasons why Jesus hand selected them, and many of them were smart enough to write a book of the Bible. And, I think when the scripture says that the 11 of them, they added a 12th after Judas, but they turned the world upside down. They had something going for them. So I don't buy that argument. I never have. I unapologetically say, choose someone with the highest character you can find and choose someone with the highest level of competence that you can find in an available living person. Talent matters. Brains matter. We hired a vocalist recently, and we scoured the country and worked very, very hard and found a high character, very high competent musician. And in the middle of a service or at the end when I'm wrapping things up, I can turn to this musician and without any rehearsal, I can say, my friend, would you sing a part of this song for us as we're wrapping this service up? He doesn't flinch. He's done it 1,000 times. He's paid the music price. His talent is solid. And you get those moments that are unexpected, that are huge blessings. I strongly suggest finding the most competent people you possibly can. The next C, character, competence. Now your chemistry. The author of a 20 million copy bestseller book, Ken Blanchard, he wrote The 1 Minute Manager. He was in my office one day, and he came in right after one of my staff or potential staff was leaving. And Ken's an older guy, and he said, so Hybels, who was that? I said, it's someone I'm thinking about hiring. He said, when they walked into your office, did you get a positive emotional charge? I said, I'm Dutch, Ken. I don't get, I rarely get those kinds of charges, And he said, what I want to know is when they walked into your office, did you have a high enough level of chemistry that you were glad to see them? And did they bring a kind of energy that matched your energy? And I said, Ken, I'm checking their character. I'm checking their competence. What is this chemistry thing? And he said, never hire anybody for a position that's going to be close to you. If it's away from you, that's another thing. If it's going to be someone you're going to work closely with, never hire someone who you don't have a positive emotional charge when they walk in the room. I'm glad to see you, and I would like to have a meeting with you, whether or not you work for me or not, because of your personality and how it meshes with mine. Now, that's not the only reason for hiring somebody, and sometimes we can get a little myopic about this and only hire people who have the same temperament and personality. That's dangerous. We need more diversity than that. We're richer with diversity. However, there are certain people that you relate easily with and have, an easy chemistry with, and there are some people who are contrarian, not because they're bad, but because the way their personality matches up with yours, and you have to ask yourself, is this going to be an enjoyable meeting every time we meet? Because I don't know about in your world, but in my world, I am a meeting. If I'm not in a meeting, I've just come from one, or I'm going to one. That's kind of how my world works. And so if you can make a choice, and the people around the circle mesh with each other and mesh with you, why wouldn't you hire somebody or add a volunteer to your team with whom you had chemistry? It's legal. I've never forgotten Ken's advice, and every time I've gone against it, I've paid. So that's just a tip that I keep in mind. It's not the most important of the C's, it's one of them. But the main thing I'm saying is, as you're building a team that you're going to work with as you move from here to there, you have that unique opportunity to fashion that team in a way that works the best with you and the best with each other. The next thing that I want to talk about is leading laterally. Now, this is seldom discussed, and it's exceedingly important, especially in complex organizations. In very small, 5-member small units, not so much. When you're in an organization that's complex enough to have department heads or business unit heads, or however you want to call them, but there's enough people at the same level, enough managers at the same level in the organization, there's a whole dynamic that happens amongst people on the same level in an organization. And when that's working right, it's magic. And when it's working wrong, it's pain. And it's pain every day, and it causes strife and division in organizations. So what destroys the good feeling amongst peers is when one peer powers up and treats another peer like they're your employee, their employee. As soon as you're not looking each other what I call eye to eye, this destroys the lateral dynamic. Now, you sometimes have to try to influence people who are at the same level in the organization as you are, but you can't use power. If you try, it will turn out badly almost every single time. Because the reflex reaction is, you're not my boss. So why are you saying I have to do this, or you think I have to do? I don't take my orders from you. You attempt to explain your dilemma, and you say, hey, Fred, I got myself in a little jam, and I know you don't have to do this for me, but I actually would really, really appreciate it if your team could help my team, and I don't have the power to command it. I don't, and I never would. But if you could help me, I would be willing to return the favor anytime, but it would mean a lot to me. We had a little event here that happened at Willow some time ago where our custodians had cleaned a room, and it was supposed to be unused, and then a ministry director used the room, which made the custodians have to re-clean it for the next day, okay? And there was just a little tiff about a broken promise there. So I said to the ministry that had used the room without permission and made extra work for the custodial staff, I said to that guy, you have to make that right. He goes, well, they're custodians. I said, the head of the custodial department is at the same level in the organization as you're at. And if you carry the mindset that that person is one down from you, and you carry that attitude, this is going to be bad blood forever. So he said, what do you suggest? And I said, I would suggest buying all of the people who had to clean that room, buying them pizza. He's like, I'm not going to do that. I said, I think you should. I think you need to make it right. A couple days later, the custodial guy comes and he goes, you know what Fred did? Fred bought our 5 guys pizza. I said, why'd he do that? And he said, I don't know. Maybe because he, made extra work for us. And I said, how'd you feel about that? He said, it made it feel about right. I can get over it now. And whenever you can encourage a peer, make something wrong right. Another example that comes to mind, I was leaving the church a little while back, and there was a member of our junior high staff who had just come off a massive retreat, 1,000 kids or something, and I knew that this was a pretty tired staff member. Well, now, 5 days later, I see her coming into the church as I'm leaving, and there's a 3-hour event for 5th and 6th graders or 4th and 5th graders, not her department, another department, sort of the children's ministry department. So I stopped the staff person. I said, wait a minute, I thought you worked in the junior high. And she said, well, yeah, of course, I do. And I said, well, the event tonight is for the younger kids. Why are you here? And she said, to pull off our retreat last weekend, we had some people from the children's ministry who showed up and helped us. And I thought the right thing to do was for me to show up and help them. That is a winning mindset. That's a very sharp leader who knows how to lead laterally. That's perfect. Finally, we'll just talk for a few moments about leading up. This is the most uncomfortable, and there's usually 2 extremes that happen here. When you talk about your boss, your board, whoever it is that you answer to, okay? So what some people will do is say, it's not my place to ever try to influence my supervisor. I mean, I do what the supervisor says and all that, okay? You all know that there are times when your supervisor is on the wrong page or they're heading down a track that might not be wise. If you're the type who says, it's just never my role or place to try to help my supervisor find a little better path, you are disrespecting your supervisor. Some of the best decisions I've made have come when my direct reports have come to me and said, Bill, I know the direction that you're trying to take us here. I strongly suggest you reconsider. Strongly suggest. I'm not sure that's the best path. I super respect the people who try in the right way to lead up to me, to influence me. And I'm always testing my direct reports. Do they have the courage to say, hey, Bill, before you pull the trigger on that, would you consider, could you modify, would you take just a moment and maybe do one last lap around this before you make that decision? Those are the people who I trust most, and those are the people who I say they might outlive me. In other words, they might be the ones to take our church's future from here to there beyond my tenure. Because you have to understand that any board, any supervisor, once in a while is going to be heading down a path that might not be the best path. And your job, if you're going to serve them well, is to say, hey, just excuse me, one last time, might you consider this? If you're ever going to try to influence your supervisor, you better do it from a position of being a super performer in your own job. If you are not performing at a super high level, don't start making suggestions to your boss. They're not going to want to hear it. The best way you earn currency or credibility with your supervisor is to be doing a terrific job at what she or he has entrusted you to do. Because then they'll listen because you're carrying your freight. You're overperforming, and they'll go, I'll listen to you, okay? Secondly, timing is very important. You have to be half psychologist to know when is the right time to come and talk to your supervisor. You know the kind of day she or he is having, and you need to choose. It shouldn't be a pressured up moment. If your boss loves football, shouldn't be at the halftime of the Super Bowl. You just let them watch the Super Bowl. Do it Monday. But timing is very important, and the spirit with which you approach a supervisor or a board about these kinds of things really matters. So when a direct report says, Bill, you know that I respect you, you know that I love our church, and I have an idea here, and I'm going to offer it up to you. You're the boss. I'm not, I'm not trying to pressure you here, but I love you, I love your ministry, I love the church, and here's an idea that I think will help us into the future. How does a boss not take that well? But you have to first perform, you got to find the right timing to do it, and then kind of put it in a way that's digestible and that is suggesting that the only reason you're doing this is to improve the organization. And most of the time you'll get a pretty good response in that way. And then usually it helps when someone says to me, but Bill, it's your call. I'm fully aware it's your call to make. And and I respect, the fact that you're gonna make it. So that's leading up. And it's the kind of the most complicated of the three, which is why people don't even try. So here's kind of my final comment on that. Most of us need to get better, dramatically better, in one of these three spokes. Like, I'm gonna ask you to search your heart here for a second. Some of you lead down pretty well. You just have sharp elbows and you don't lead laterally very well. Or some of you lead laterally pretty well. You just have never even thought about leading up. And you could do a much better job of that. Which one of these spokes do you think you need the most work on? Where do you need to do additional reading? Where do you need to have a little additional discussion? Because up the road a little bit, if you keep developing yourself, there will come a time when you feel a certain level of comfort in leading up, leading laterally, and leading down. And then that center part, where you're leading yourself, that's when a leader really catches her stride or his stride. When you go, I think I'm building trust with my colleagues. I think I'm helping my boss. I think I have a good team that I'm blessing, and I think I'm leading myself well. It gets sustainable. And again, you feel like you've caught your stride, and that's when it feels like nothing's better than the privilege of leadership.